Okay, time now to go to our first panel, which is about tourism perspectives in the evolving global economic context. I mentioned the fact that we're post-COVID, that we are talking about record-breaking figures this year, but we also know there are issues to resolve around climate change, around harmful emissions, around education, infrastructure and recruitment. We've got geopolitical instability. We've got the American elections coming up tomorrow, isn't it? Which could just change the whole game. But anyway, let's worry about that on Wednesday, or maybe longer. But let's find out now about what are the prospects for tourism and hospitality and investment in particular. And to discuss this, I am delighted to be joined by David Goodger, who is Managing Director, Europe and Middle East Tourism Economics. Please come on. Thank you, David.
Hi.
Also, Olivier Chavy, CEO of the Lux Collective, a major sponsor today, and he's got some very interesting things to tell us as we go along. And from Kenyan Airways, the commercial manager for the UK, I believe, Chetan Borkhatria. Would you please come up? Where are you? There you are. Whatever you want. Chetan, would you like to take a seat here? Up to you. Go to the fire and come. Go to the fire. Okay, so, Dave, I think it's beholden on you to set the scene for us.
Right, yes, thank you, Rajan. Yeah, well, I think you've already given my first stats already, and was also mentioned by Dr. Talib there as well. So we are at recovery this year. We are back at that 1.5 billion international travellers this year is what it's looking like. We're not quite there in terms of the year-to-date data. We're still a few percent off that 2019 figure, and that's sort of the benchmark we've been looking for. But I think the thing to remember in that is 2019 was a record year for travel, and we're at least going to match it this year. Our forecast suggests we're going to surpass that, so it is a new record year of travel. And we're fully into a growth outlook, it seems. So the two words I've been overusing the past couple of years have been cautious optimism. I think we're now possibly moving into an area of where we can just say, drop the cautious, just talk about optimism, because we are talking about growth. I don't want to be a hostage to fortune. You've already reeled off a lot of the concerns that are out there. But yeah, we are still seeing, when we're looking at what people are spending their money on, they are prioritising travel like they haven't before. When you look at the advanced economies, how much they're spending on travel, it sort of fluctuates in a narrow band between sort of 7.5%, 8.5%. This year, it's above 8.5%. People are spending huge amounts on travel. They're prioritising travel. They're prioritising new experiences over everything. So now we are looking ahead to where next, and we think that prioritisation remains. When we carry out surveys, we're still seeing sort of 3/4 of the respondents coming back saying, yes, they prioritise travel every year. They want to have this travel. And when it's, what are they wanting to spend on, and what destinations they're wanting, we're hearing about value for money. Obviously, that's sort of a key concern right now for everyone, but they are wanting new experiences, visiting new destinations, getting out there, seeing that those new destinations, new experiences, new opportunities. And yeah, we are looking where next, 1.5 billion now, we are looking ahead to the 2 billion. When are we going to get 2 billion? And we think that will come before the end of the decade. And yeah, lots of growth opportunities around the world. I'll stop talking at that point.
Well, I want to just pursue this a little bit further. In terms of the different markets around the world, what's happening? Is it kind of uniformly great, or is it patchy? It varies, shall we say. There are obviously some that are slower growing. We're looking at, I've mentioned advanced economies, that's fully recovered. Some of the emerging markets are slower. We've seen China being slower to open up, and China is definitely lagging. That is sort of the really big question we're being asked, and we're asking ourselves is, when is the Chinese traveller coming back? To short-haul Asian destinations, they're starting to come back now. Probably sort of next year we expect that regional recovery. Probably not until 2026 until we start seeing the Chinese long-haul traveller fully returning, which then does mean that you're seeing sort of some of these different growth rates. If you're looking at it in terms of growth perspective, Asia Pacific is doing fantastically well, but it's coming from that
lower base. When we're looking at sort of where is performing, yes, we're seeing growth pretty much everywhere. We are seeing growth in Africa. We are seeing growth here in Europe, seeing growth in Americas. A lot of this does seem to be sort of the short haul growth. It is a short haul recovery. First, we saw domestic travel come back first. Then it's sort of the short haul is where we're still at. We're not seeing that longer haul coming back fully. I think one of the standout regions, though, I have to mention, is Middle East.
Yep.
That has been the fastest to recover. Its levels of travel are well above 2019. It's still seeing some of the fastest growth in some of those destinations. And I think the reasons for that is some of the positive effects of geopolitics. There's obviously huge risks going on there, and we don't need to dwell on what's happening there, but you have seen improved relations certainly amongst some of the GCC members, and you've seen that travel coming back there. But you have also seen two things there: connectivity and destination development. They're the two things that have really sort of been driving a lot of that growth. So yeah, taking the lessons, I guess, for Africa, I know we want to focus on that. Yeah, it is, would say, the things that are potentially challenges there would be getting that connectivity, whether it's in terms of visa openness, allowing people to travel in easily, as well as that physical connectivity, so the air connectivity. And then beyond that, yeah, destination development. I think we all know what's happening in Saudi Arabia, what has been happening in Dubai. That has attracted people, is people wanting those new experiences, the new destinations. And just one final thought on Africa as well. People are wanting sort of outdoor experiences, adventure experiences, authenticity. I think there's a huge amount of that to be offered in the region.
I think a lot of those themes will play out today, particularly when we refer to individual situations. Olivier, before we get to specifically your perspective from the Lux Collective's angle, in terms of investment and hotel development, how are you seeing the macro climate? How are you seeing the world at the moment?
I see it as very dynamic. It's an interesting dynamic, actually. We have different ways of growing estate. You have those so-called PEs, private equities, funds, which are very dynamic, deep pocket, lots of cash, even though they still are a bit picky on where to spend it. But the cash is here for sure. We are seeing a great improvement in the financing, more particularly in Africa. We see a much more lean and better policies on the financing. And then we see a lot of more and more family offices, interestingly. Family office for smaller growth, smaller investment. And what I've seen in the last few years is a much more reasonable ratio debt versus equity. We are going back to a much more reasonable ratio, getting closer to 40% down the table versus 25, 20. I've seen 18 in my life, but it's healthier. It's much more healthier. And we see some countries opening really nicely to new investment. I just came back from Zanzibar, and I saw an amazing development, putting luxury on the map over there with the Four Seasons Grandbrook, an amazing project. We took over a property over there last year, flagged Lux, and is doing extremely well. What's interesting, I just take this as an example, this comes to my mind. You have 5 daily flights from Dubai to Zanzibar. Just think about it, 5 daily flights to Zanzibar.
Yeah.
It's just crazy somehow, 1.3 million passengers per year, which is about the same as Mauritius. So anyway, your question was about the growth and investment. It's a very interesting dynamic right now. You see, what was not true many years ago, once you put luxury on the map, you need more luxury. And it's kind of self-fueling each destination. So it's a very interesting process right now.
Could you actually, for the sake of the audience who perhaps don't know that much about Lux Collective, could you explain just what about
So Lux Collective is a luxury brand currently based in Mauritius Island. We have 2/3 of our portfolio owned assets. We have a more global footprint. When I say global, it's more what I call myself the Indian Ocean rainbow, with some properties from Zanzibar to Mauritius, Reunion Island, all the way to China and Southeast Asia and Middle East as well. It's ex-Nayad many years ago. And we have 6 properties in Mauritius, on the west coast and the southwest coast and the east coast. Very high-end product, very well known on the market, and with 3 different distribution channels from tour operator, OTAs, and direct booking. My predecessor was an icon in the business, Paul Jones, who was one of the father of One and Only, and working close with Sol Kersner at the time. So he left an amazing legacy with strong foundation in the luxury arena, not only in Mauritius, but in our different properties around the world.
Very good. Now, we have a last-minute addition to the panel, who I would like to introduce on stage. Please welcome Toke Benson Iwinka, who is the Commissioner of Tourism, Art and Culture for Lagos State. Thank you so much for joining us. Are you fresh off the plane?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
You have literally come from the airport.
Yes.
My goodness, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I know that you are also replacing the
governor.
Executive Governor of Lagos State.
Yes, I am.
Thank you for that. Well, perhaps if I can throw you in right now, we had the general macro perspective. We had Olivier talking a little bit about Africa. How are you feeling it? What's the temperature at the moment when it comes to the tourism climate?
Well, if I'm going to speak particularly about Nigeria and about Lagos, Nigeria, I believe that we're ready for business right now. It's something we haven't really looked at in the past. We haven't looked at our country from the tourism perspective. But right now, with our growing global markets in music, art and fashion, and our pristine beaches. For instance, I'm from Lagos, and in Lagos, we have about 183 square kilometers of beachfront, pristine waters, clear sand, clean sand, waiting for investments and investors. So I think the perspectives right now that we're thinking about is how we're going to get an influx of investors into Lagos and Nigeria and make it that destination people never looked at before.
You might be in the right room.
I'm glad I'm here then, yes.
Because I do know that, obviously, as you mentioned it, Nigeria has never really particularly pushed the tourism. Obviously, I think it's something like 1/5, 1 in 5 of the African continent is Nigerian. That's that high.
Well, we're about 200 million strong and growing, yes.
So it's a huge country, huge.
It's a
potential.
huge population.
And
yeah.
the culture and the music in Lagos particularly.
It's amazing.
That's something that you're really pushing now, isn't it?
Oh yes. We're pushing Afrobeat. We're known all over the world now globally for our music. We're pushing Nollywood, which is our movie industry. We're pushing our fashion industry as well. So we're almost at the verge where we're consuming what we're producing locally right now. Our next best phase is to sell it to the world. We need to sell our fashion to the world. We need to sell our fabric to the world. We're already selling our music to the world. And our movie, it's competing globally right now.
In terms of domestic or African tourism, you've always done pretty well, haven't you? I mean, there have been people coming from inside the continent.
Well, for trade, commercial trade,
right.
yes. Not really for tourism. Not really for tourism. We've had interstate trade between the West African coastal countries. I know for Nigerians go a lot to South Africa. I think South Africa got that move before we thought about it. So we have people going from Nigeria to South Africa at all times, rather than coming to Europe or the Americas. But we've never really had an influx of people into Nigeria or into Lagos for tourism purposes. It's mainly about trade, it's about business, it's about conferences. But I think our next focus is that bit of the world which we have not really looked at and which we should be looking at. Sometimes I say we can compare Lagos, Nigeria to Cancun, Mexico. And all the indices are the same. The only thing is that Mexico has managed to market Cancun away from actual Mexico. And when they speak globally and they speak of the insecurities in Nigeria, I look at the movies from out of Mexico and I say, we're doing much better than they are. Apologies to the Mexican people. We're doing much better than they are. But we have not focused on capturing Lagos as that spot that people can actually go to for your conferences, for leisure, for beach life or the music, the local cuisine. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Okay, so watch this space. We will see Nigeria
Yes.
coming to a cinema near you quite soon. Chetan, we were talking there about internal African travel. Kenyan Airlines is huge, isn't it? I mean, in terms of relatively for the continent. What's the perspective for you about how things are at the moment?
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with the mission statement of Kenya Airways, which is to propel Africa's prosperity by connecting people, culture, and market. With the robust demand, what we have seen, so I'll just give a high-level overview. We have seen that, example, the tourism has increased overall. And if we look at from Europe perspective, example, Heathrow, we've seen that we've ramped up our frequency of operating from daily flights last year to, we operated 10 to 11 flights. And then towards the last quarter in 2023, right through to March this year, we have in fact doubled our capacity. So we operated double daily flights to Nairobi, and 60% of the passengers are connecting beyond, and 40% is point to point. We made changes to Amsterdam, so we were operating this year 4 to 5 flights. We ramped up the capacity, operated daily. Charles de Gaulle, we also increased our frequency from daily to 9 flights during peak season. Coming back to the Middle East, well, Asia and Asia Pacific. For Bangkok, we relaunched Bangkok, and we're doing 5 flights a week, and there's a potential of increasing to daily. JFK, USA, fantastic. So we've seen a huge market according to the Kenya Tourist Board data. For 2023, we've seen that USA is #1 contributor to Kenya, and we've actually maximized by increasing our flight from daily to 9 flights. We operate in USA in June, and then in July and August this year, we ramped up to 10 flights, and this winter we will be operating 9 flights. And following same next year, so the demand is there. With regards to the changes, of course, I would like to what Dave mentioned. So Middle East, I think, let me just highlight on that. So Middle East, we've got 3 flights, Mombasa to Dubai, which is actually complementing 11 flights we've got from Nairobi to Dubai. And we are seeing the demand for that is, of course, intra-Africa. Nobody wants to go from Europe all the way down to Nairobi and then to Dubai, but there is a lot of trade example, so we are seeing that. And the changes we made, what really helped was Kenya Airways, for the first time in 2024, for the first 6 months, we made a profit after tax. And it's a profit we've made first time in a decade. So the last profit we made was 2013. So that is a fantastic news. With regards to one of the challenge, maybe I don't know whether I should tackle these.
No, please do. No, yeah, absolutely.
So with regards to visa regulation and partly obstacles, I would like to share with all of you that Kenya government abolished visas for Kenya. So Kenya is a visa-free country, and it's replaced with electronic travel authorization. It's called ETA, but the fees are less than what you would pay ordinarily on visa fees, and that is a fantastic news which I would like to share with all of you. I think in terms of connectivity, your question. So connectivity partly it's challenging for the aviation industry to get the leverages of the aircrafts. Capacity has been constrained, and to some airports, it's literally impossible to increase capacity. So example, London Heathrow, we cannot get slots. There is a lot of demand. So in that sense, yeah, it is a bit challenging for us. So, the last bit, overall Africa, where we are seeing a lot of demand, we're seeing Zanzibar,
Yep.
we're seeing demand on Kilimanjaro, we're seeing demand for Southern Africa. And there again, we have capitalized, for Johannesburg example, we're operating 4 flights a day. And then on Cape Town, we're operating daily flight, but we're putting a wide body aircraft, a 787. So we are capitalizing in all these. The outlook, I think, for Kenya and for Kenya Airways year to date is positive, and future for Kenya is also very positive outlook. That's it. Thank you.
Olivier, so when you hear news like that, that at least one of the airlines in Africa is doing well. In fact, I know the big ones do well. There are issues, but which we're always going to have, about intra-connectivity within the African continent, right? That does affect everyone. But tell me, from your perspective, when you hear news like that, does that increase your confidence in investment?
It does. Obviously, Africa continent is on the ramp up right now and starting to align. And what you just said about visa, you still have some countries where you need a visa, you need a yellow fever passport, and you need insurance. I was traveling last week and I had to subscribe insurance to enter the country. Those are barriers and add up on tourism. But we are getting there, and I have to say that the infrastructure are getting better and better regarding airlines and regarding access to airport and transportation and transfers. So definitely moving. You know, you have some other countries where it's kind of stagnant, but African continent is moving. Not fast-paced, but moving, interestingly moving, getting there. Asia is booming in terms of infrastructure, and Asia is helping Africa as well to grow. I'm thinking about the Chinese. So interesting dynamic, but the less friction and barriers you have to enter the countries or to interconnect the countries, the better. People are used now to efficiency. Yeah? And any add-on in terms of cost and hurdle and admin hurdle, I mean, most of the travelers now are used to check in online, QR code. You don't even speak to anyone to go to your seat, okay? And you don't want to speak to anyone. Whereas if all those obstacles are eliminated, it could be a game changer.
And in terms of the decisions that the Lux Collective make about future projects, how much are you basing those on current data and what you're hearing, the buzz, if you like? How's the thinking go when it comes to that?
Listen, the thinking goes by itself. I have 3 strong projects in Kenya for developing hotels over there, and this came for the last 6 months, and because of many reasons, but including what you just said, the dynamic, the connectivity, and the continent is doing extremely well when you have so many connections, East, West, Middle East, and Europe. It's very, very interesting, and you want to be before the wave and before competition opens their eyes. So, no, I mean, I'm very bullish on some part of Africa for sure.
Yeah,
very bullish.
Well, let's just do a bit of connection here, because Nigeria. What would be the pros and the cons for you of going into Nigeria?
So, I liked what you said about image and safetiness, and you need to spread the message about what you just said. I'm not sure it's in the mind of everybody. I know very well Cancun and Mexico, as you mentioned. I never felt so safe in Mexico City. I even spent vacation a week with my wife 2 years ago, and I used to go to Cancun a lot. They did an amazing job to brand the destination. I'm thinking some other countries, for example, Ras Al Khaimah comes to my mind in Middle East. they did a branding exercise. They did put Ras El Khaimah on the map. They did a huge branding exercise to promote the destination as a brand. And you'll get there, but it's the first step you need to do to spread the message about safetiness, about access, about infrastructure. I know about the music, about the food, about the fun, about the white sand beach and everything. But I think the mass tourism is concerned about easy access and safetiness and all the barriers I mentioned. So you'll get there, but it's I think you start the process to promote the destination as a tourism destination.
I mean, how much is the mass tourism paradigm model of interest to you? Or would you prefer it to go down the more cultural, boutique-y, I don't know, what kind of routes are you thinking?
Well, a much bigger reach. Right now, I don't think we're there at all. I don't think we're there at all. Like you spoke about the visa issues. We also complain about the visa issues because we're subnational, being a state within the country and being the state that wants to sell tourism, basically, because we're on the coast, not the whole of Nigeria is on the coast. So we're on the coast, so we know what we want to sell. And we're looking at that brand job, which is why I mentioned Cancun, Mexico. And the only way we can do it is to speak from within on how we can solve that barrier, the visa issues. Even within the African countries, we cannot move freely. So if within Africa we cannot move freely, to get it right, to get that mass movement in there, we need to work mainly on access. Reduce the controls in getting people in there so you can entice more people to come. So we had a festival that just ended a few days ago, and we had visitors coming in from, I believe, Colombia, artists coming in from Colombia, and they had the same issues around access and visa. I said to them, why can't we have a situation where once you do the visa, you apply online, the process should take place within the travel hours you're coming into that country. The visa should be ready. But we were on the verge, or the country was on the verge of deporting these artists, which is one of the things that is hindering the tourism for us. So like he says, we need to make concerted efforts as to getting it right. And I think for us as a state, we're really working on it. If we have the Agric zone, which is the northern Nigeria, and then we have the southern Nigeria, which is the zone that would want the tourists in. So our interests are not really aligning. So that's why I said we're going to work from within and push that message out. We're going to do that branding of saying, yes, you can come to Nigeria. Nigeria is not what the world makes you believe it is. There are people living in Nigeria. There are foreigners living in Nigeria. And the stories from within is not what is being told outside.
You remind me of, and some of you might remember this, that when Colombia had this image problem, if you like, about it being dangerous, the campaign was "the only danger is that you'll want to stay." And it was a superb campaign, and it really worked. And Colombia is fantastic, by the way. So I suspect, yes, a lot of this is perception, and you have to,
it is perception.
You have to kind of go through that. I'm kind of interested in also, when I was talking to you about what kind of tourism we're talking about, because when it comes to you, Luxcliffe, you do resorts a lot, don't you?
Yeah. We do resort for the Lux brand, but we have some brands for urban resort or even business hotels with a socio. And but our DNA is resorts. Yeah.
Yeah. What about the? I mean, let's face it. I know we need to end quite soon, but the sustainability angle, which is very important in this conference. Let's deal with the human angle first. In terms of infrastructure, in terms of training, in terms of skills, how's that doing from your experience?
Yeah, I'll answer your questions. As I said, I was in Zanzibar last week, and I met an ex-colleague from Hilton who settled in Zanzibar. He never left. He took a one-way ticket, and he never left the country. And I was asking him, so what's your business? So he says, I have many businesses, from a pork business in Tanzania to hotels in Zanzibar to consulting. And he said, and I have a school. said, you have a school? Yes, he said, I have 5,000 students, I have a school. And we have the support of the government, and we are training and educating the local population for hospitality. And he's an hotelier, and I smiled because it's part of our journey as well. It's part of our journey. I remember part of my portfolio at some point, I had some hotel in Bora Bora, and the first thing we had to teach to the staff over there was to wear shoes. And so educating, mentoring, growing is fully part of our business, for sure.
And using local talent at a senior level as well.
Yeah, mainly.
Yeah.
You have amazing results when you grow from within. We have, I think, only one expat as a GM in our properties in Mauritius, and other GMs are Mauritians, and it works really well because it keeps the morale, and it keeps you work on turnover when you promote from within. There is no glass ceiling per se, so it's definitely more than a trend. It's a must do.
Yeah. And then the other aspect that I want to touch on is obviously the environment. In your hotels now, how much are you thinking about along those lines? We're going to talk about ESG quite a lot later.
Yeah.
These are now stipulations, aren't they?
Yeah, it's fully part of our lives. I mean, part of my exec team, I have a chief sustainable officer, and it's part of our day-to-day way of thinking. And the beauty of our industry is that we have now educated the clients. You remember when a few years ago you asked the clients to drop their towels in the bathtub to have the fresh towels, and they would say, oh, they save me money. And now they said, oh my God, we need to preserve the planet, and let's not replace my towel for the next 3 days. So the consumer itself, which are all of us, plus the client, they have been educated quite wisely for the last few years by the big players out there. And it's a very interesting move. I remember 20 years ago, I was a young exec at Hilton, and we bought Scandic. And the CEO of Scandic told us, we have educated our client to take care of their breakfast. We give them a tray, and they go to serve themselves. And the notion of educating the client is quite interesting, because what seems to be overdoing it at the beginning becomes very wise with the end result, because now the client is fully part of the initiative of sustainability, because it's part of their lives as well. So it's not a constraint anymore. I met in Europe for Top Reza, I met a startup. Those guys, they created a device which you easily plug to your shower, and it does show you how many liters you have consumed for your shower. And in full service property, not maybe high-end luxury, but in the full service, if you incentivize and say, hey, if you use only 12 liters of water, which by the way, it's salted water, go through all the process, it's very expensive, you have free upgrade to the gastronomic restaurant from your. It seems a bit sketchy to start with. I'm convinced it will become a norm, and the parents will say to the kids, how many liters did you use for your shower? And it will become a norm in full service hotels, resort on the beach, and so on, in some remote destinations. So those are just small examples, but
that device is at the beta stage, I think you said.
No. I bought 4 to test them. I test 2 in Maldives, in our property, and 2 in Le Mans in Mauritius. And no pushback whatsoever so far from clients. And in fact, they have fun with it. And more particularly, those who are coming with the kids, they're having fun with it. And I'm always screaming when my daughter stays half an hour in the shower. Not for the water, but for the values. But it's fully part of our journey today. And it will be even more for the next generation. So I do not take this as a constraint anymore. I do not take this as a mean of saving anymore. I take this as value and of course preserving the future of our kids. But it's fully part of development of our business. And when you receive grading or rewards, or the sustainability part is fully part of the grading of your properties.
One last point I want to make is and I'm going to ask you about this too, is the small and medium enterprises, which is so important to this industry. Lux Collective is a bigger operation, I guess, isn't it? You wouldn't really call it a small to medium enterprise.
Yeah.
What's the future for them? Because they are such a big backbone of the industry. Do you think that, and then let me ask you about Nigeria, how much of that is being protected by and being fostered?
Well, you know, the tourism is very local. When we promote the destination and we promote the beachfront, they're more like locals. The staff in there is locals. While he was talking, I was taking down notes, and then it occurred to me also too that we should be looking at a hospitality institute where we can train these young ones, train the local people, train the fishermen, train their women in so many things, so that we recycle them within those properties or within those businesses that would come up, and make sure that we don't look outside of that ecosystem to do all that employment. So, like we said, we're 200 million strong. We shouldn't be exporting or importing.
No.
You know what you just said? I just spoke about Ras Al Khaimah as an example. Back in 2012 or 13, when His Highness decided to put Ras Al Khaimah on the map, one of his first decisions was to bring Vatel School, Hotel Management School, and he opened a school over there for the locals. And it was an interesting move. And same in Saudi, when they did King Abdullah Economic City, they did open a school, a hospital, a couple of stuff too, and then they moved the people.
It's an eye-opener for the locals to see how much they can actually be part of that ecosystem. It's dangerous when you bring in 5-star hotels and then you actually bring in the staff in there as well, and they're not part of that system. But when they see they're part of that system and they're employed, they're building capacity, they become more useful to themselves, they dream of being business owners like that as well. And it eventually happens. So I think the Institute is something that I'm taking away from this conversation.
Okay, watch this space. I'm going to leave it there because I know we're running late. But can you please thank this panel for the opening salvo? Thank you very much.
Thank you.